Well, late on Wednesday, the office of the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, filed a lawsuit against former President Trump and his 3 oldest children. The claim accuses the Trumps and their organization of inflating the value of assets in order to secure favorable bank loans. Now, a couple of things we should keep in mind as we go through this, because she's been after him a long time, right? And she's been very vocal about it. She talks to the press a lot about it. In fact, she campaigned on the premise of that she would go after him. In fact, she called him an illegitimate president in 2018 when she was campaigning for the job of Attorney General. The Attorney General is an elected official, right? And so we knew that she didn't like him. She wanted him if she got the job. So she kind of had to, right, go after him. So the question is...
I love that this is her campaign promise. Like for other campaign promises, like I'm going to lower your taxes. I'm going to get
not for an attorney general.
I'm going to get you affordable health care. I'm going to do this. For her, I'm going to go after Trump.
It's like, well, because attorney general, right? She's the attorney of the state. So she was promising New Yorkers that she would stop whatever shenanigans he was up to, right? At the time, remember, he is a commander in chief. Mm-hmm. He is the president. Right. She had no qualms about saying, if I get in this office, I'm going to go through his stuff with a fine-tooth comb. She, in fact, did that. So we know that he's been, she's been deposing people. She's been deposing his tax returns, his attorneys, all manner of things, right? She deposed his children. Some of them did sit for their deposition. Some of them sat and pled the fifth many times. He was going to sit for a deposition, but then his house was raided, which put him in the middle of a criminal investigation. So he didn't sit for that investigation, but he intended to. So she had been warning us. So, she's public about it. She likes to talk about it. This is a campaign promise. And she warned us earlier in this week that something big was going to happen, right? So this is her big mic drop. Now, before we go through it, I want to remind you that this is what she is claiming and her office. It is all alleged at this point. The former president should enjoy the presumption of innocence until proven guilty, even if the mainstream media does not want him to have this. We saw all manner of jubilation in the press today about yeah, you got him, up top.
Look at the front page of Drudge this afternoon. It's like walls closing in.
I'm sure it feels like that for him. But again, we owe him the presumption of innocence, right? And so let's let cooler heads prevail, but see what it is that she found, right? No matter, even if you think it is a witch hunt. He, in fact, did say, though, before we get to what she's claiming, let's hear his take on it. And then we'll go down her claims.
Well, she campaigned on it 4 years ago. It was a vicious campaign, and she just talked about Trump, and we're going to indict him, we're going to get him. She knew nothing about me. I never heard of her. And she said, we're going to get him. Her whole campaign was based on that. I actually thought that they would never bring a case, and she brought it. And the reason I thought, because she didn't have a case, I was of the impression she wanted to settle. But I had a problem, because how do you pay something, even if it's a small amount of money, if you're not guilty? This was just a continuation of a witch hunt that began when I came down the escalator at Trump Tower.
Okay, so it is a civil case, right? She says we're making a recommendation of a criminal case. So what happens if he then decides, nope, I'm not going to respond to this. I'm just going to take this claim and use it as toilet paper, right? Then she would get a default judgment and get to start seizing some of his assets, and she would be able to enforce what she wants. So he has to respond to it, even though, as I saw someone mention in the chat, yes, it's civil, right? And again, remember, your initial claim is think of it as, what's that character in Walking Dead who has the bat with all the spikes, right? That's what this is. You have to come out swinging with all you've got. It doesn't make it true. It doesn't make, it's your hardest hit. And then through the act of litigation, it will all be whittled down at some point.
Negan. I was waiting for the chat room. Thank you, book.
Yeah.
Negan.
So this is like the attorney general's version of that, like scary bat, right? You have to do this when you file your claim. So, okay, now we can read this with cooler heads. So again, she may have had it out for him, but she seems to have found a lot because she was looking so closely, right? The suit does claim fraud. Fraud is an incredibly high bar to claim. To prove, you have to prove that someone actually had intention, right, to say something and do something else. But it spells out how the Trumps used accountants and then ignored what those accountants told them and did what they wanted anyway. Here's just a few examples in this one. For example, they received a series of bank-ordered appraisals for this property on Wall Street that calculated the value at $200 million as of August 1st, 2010, and $220 million as of November 1st, 2012. Yet in the 2011 statement, they listed this property with a value of $524 million and increased the valuation to $527 million in the 2012 statement, and then to $530 million in the 2013 statement, more than twice the value calculated by the professionals. Now, the professionals they spoke to said that the Trumps actually did instruct them to do that because, no one thinks that Ivanka is like really good at keeping the spreadsheets and saying, well, I'm going to take this value and do it to this, right? Clearly they have people that are managing their spreadsheets, and those people said that this is what they did. Another example that they put here, the triplex apartment on Trump Tower was valued at being 30,000 square feet when in fact it was only 10,000 square feet. As a result, in 2015, the apartment was valued at $327 million in total, or $29,000 per square feet. And that price was absurd given that at that point, only one apartment in New York City had ever sold for $100 million at a price of square foot of less than $10,000. And that sale was for a new build. And this is where she takes a dig, but Trump Tower is 30 years old. So clearly it's not that. Right. Oh, and that hits Trump right where, because even in this interview with Hannity last night where he was asked about this, he's like, look, he's like, we built a great business. We built, great real estate all around the world. Look at this room. And he was like talking about how and the room was beautiful. So that's a punch right in his stomach. She specifically stuck that in here. Yeah, this was a new build. Yours is an old.
She popped him in the ego.
Yes, right. She's going for it, right? Okay, let's talk about. I
saw someone in the chat say she's just trying to make a name for herself.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, if he did these things, right, that's not right. You and I cannot do these things. We absolutely shouldn't. We would have our feet held to the fire for them. So both things can be true. She can be gunning for him, and it can be true that he did these things that we otherwise would not be allowed to do, right? But again, we don't know. We're presuming innocence. We're just going through I'm not leading the witness here. Okay, the golf course in Scotland. She says the valuation assumed 2,500 homes could be developed when the Trump organization had already obtained zoning approval to develop less than 1,500 cottages and apartments, many of which were expressly identified as being only for short-term rental. So the $267 million value attributed to those 2,500 homes accounted for more than 80% of the total $327 million valuation for the property on its 2014 statement. Further, in another financial statement about initiation fees of the Mar-a-Lago golf course, the golf course at Westchester, she says that the valuation for the 2011 assumed new members would pay an initiation fee of nearly $200,000 for each of the 67 unsold memberships, even though many members in that year paid no initiation fee at all. In some instances, Mr. Trump specifically directed club employees to reduce or eliminate the initiation fees to boost membership numbers. Now, I'm not sure, that is that piece of it, right? So you're saying we're going to sell 67 memberships and that will amount to $200,000 of new member fees. Mm-hmm. I don't think he in his head walks around and thinks, well, I'll give that guy one for free, or we don't normally take them, right? Like, that's not the worst thing. You can assume that you will take that cash in and then later say, oh, we didn't charge those, right? Or that was a loss, because he was assuming new members. I don't know that, again, some of the property evaluations seem extremely egregious, whereas some of them seem maybe just less so. We should keep in mind that she did hold this until right before a midterm election, right? Even though she's presumably had it.
Well, do we know that? I mean, I guess we always on this
show
show try to follow the facts and follow the truth. And I mean, so do we know when she had this completed?
No, yeah, you're right. Good point. And she was hoping that he would be deposed, right?
Yeah.
And that was very recent that he did not sit for his deposition. So she may have felt like, well, I'm not going to get the big fish, so it's time to drop this. But I see many people online saying, oh, she definitely wanted to affect the election. We don't know that.
Well, I mean,
right?
also you come out with an announcement. I 2 days ago, she comes out with this big announcement ahead of, she's like, hey, we've got something big coming. You guys ready for what we've got big? The only way you make an announcement like that is either if like you literally arrested like 1,000, I don't know, like you broke up like a pedophile ring or something, like we got the big ones,
But this to her and her staff is the big one.
I got John Gotti,
Right.
And this, of course, so she makes this big announcement. She wants the whoop-de-doo and running for re-election, of course, and she wants higher office.
So,
and turns out it ended up being Geraldo and Al Capone's vault.
An empty vault. Right.
So the question remains, so what, right? If he did all of this, does it hurt you and me, even though we are not allowed to do these things? Well, look at some of the privileges that he obtained by doing these things. For instance, she says, his statements of financial condition were repeatedly and persistently submitted to banks insured by the FDIC for the purpose of influencing the actions of those institutions. And the statements were used to obtain and maintain favorable loans over at least an 11-year period, not only obtaining these loans, but obtaining them at low interest rates because of these financial statements. So Deutsche Bank, 125 million, Deutsche Bank again, 107 million, and then another 54 million in 2004, Deutsche Bank again in 170 million. Part of my problem with this is that the elected official should not really be representing the bank here.
Right. I mean, think about the people of New York, right, who are like dealing with high crime. They're dealing with all sorts of criminal problems in the state of New York. And their attorney general is grandstanding about basically, if you think about it, literally protecting Deutsche Bank at the end of the day.
Yeah, because Deutsche Bank is the one that was harmed the most if they were not going through his financial statements and sort of verifying. I mean, those of you who have received any kind of loan or financial product in the last 10 years know that basically they're asking for blood samples at this point. Like, it's really stinking hard since the financial crisis, but not if you're Trump, right? And so... yes, that is unfair. But again, I have a problem with the government doing the business of big banking when it really should be Deutsche Bank that is filing this lawsuit on behalf. That's just one point of it, right? So I'm not saying that she shouldn't have done it. But I am saying it's a little unsavory to me to see the government litigating on behalf of big business. He also, if you look at the next slide, was able to secure very beneficial insurance policies from insurers participating in the Trump organization's surety program and directors and officers liability policies. So, there were a lot of perks to telling financial institutions that your assets were highly inflated. So what does she want? Here is her asks. She wants to appoint this independent monitor to oversee compliance of financial reporting for at least the next 5 years. So she basically wants someone to babysit his finances that's appointed by the court for the next 5 years so he can't do this again. She wants to replace the current trustees of his trust. She wants to require the Trump organization to prepare these compliant and audited financial statements. So basically, you're not going to do business unless we are watching you carefully, and we're going to have, a compliant audit. But she also wants to punish all of them personally. She wants to bar him and the Trump organization from applying for loans for the next 5 years. She wants to bar him and his 3 older children that are named in this suit as serving from any officer or director in the state of New York, as well as Alan Weissenberg and Jeffrey McConney. And she wants $250,000 at least. Now, it's interesting because when The Guardian broke this story on their, well, they didn't break it. She broke it herself. But when they first published their story, they had this little tidbit about it, which I found extremely interesting because I think that they are trying to set this up as Letitia James versus Trump. So here's how they described it. They say, Mr. Trump has denied wrongdoing and has called the investigation a politically motivated witch hunt by Letitia James, an attorney general he is called racist. Miss James, who is black, rejected a settlement offer from the Trump organization last month to resolve the matter. So this idea that it's a racial fight is floating out there in the media, and I find that to be, I don't know. I don't like that. Do you have any comments on that?
Not really. I mean, of course, that's always what the left is going to say. They're always going to try to pin it on racism, right?
Right.
So he has a problem with her, then he's a racist. Like, that's always where it goes. It devolves into that, and then you shut down any conversation about it. So,
Yes.
I'm not surprised by that at all. Like, it's a racial thing that she's going after him and he's going after her. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Now, he's offered to settle this case, and she did not accept it. He offered before it was even filed, so he knew it was coming. This is not a big bombshell to him. He knew it, or else he wouldn't have offered a settlement, right? But clearly she wanted this week for, this. She wanted this. She considers, like, the Attorney General's office, I believe, is feeling like this is a win. It got a lot of press. It has a lot of acclaim, and she's tweeting it. She's having press conferences. So people who dislike Trump are really calling her a hero, which makes sense why she wouldn't have accepted the settlement. But I think it's clear that the Trumps do not want a trial, especially since they are facing a criminal investigation by the Justice Department. They don't want to be deposed. They don't want to be able to incriminate themselves in a way to make their hot legal situation even hotter, if that's possible. So the Trumps can respond to this. Maybe they're going to poke some holes in their claim. It will go back and forth with depositions. But I do think they'll settle it. The best thing to do right now is just let her have this victory week, keep your mouth shut, and then just, let it play its course. That the problem is that's never been Trump's, strength is just let things lie and play it out in the courts and don't talk. He can't. Yeah, and so, we see him now incriminating himself or saying things that can be used. So we'll see.
Wow. I mean, what he said in that interview last night was very much like, hey, it's a witch hunt. She's been coming after me. She ran on this. She campaigned on this. He didn't go into specifics. So he just kept it like, this is clearly a political witch hunt. She campaigned on this. She's coming after me. It's a witch hunt. Like, he can stick to that.
Yeah. But the lawyers will have at it. They're going to start to sort of go back and forth and poke holes in things. And again, the press will report whatever they file as motions as fact. We are not going to do this. We're only just going to run down what is being claimed because, again, the ethos is supposed to be presumption of innocence.